Hey everyone, Christian Harris here with my third Christian's Conversations with. Today I am joined by Bryce DeArmond to talk about kind of, what he's gone through in today's job market, his work experience, thoughts he could share with everyone. So before we get to some questions, I'm just going to let Bryce give a quick, 2 minutes on who he is so everyone gets to know him a little bit better. So Bryce, if you want to take the floor.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say thanks for having me. It's really exciting. Love what you're doing here, showcasing people's experience and where they've come from, where they want to go. As Chris mentioned, Bryce DeArmond, about 20 plus years in sales, partnership, account management is kind of my background. And I've got a pretty diverse background from telecom to SaaS, startup, EV startup, service as a service through accounting services, and everything from a frontline seller all the way up to director of sales and heading up a full sales division at some organizations. So pretty diverse background. And yeah, married, got 4 kids. My youngest is 3, my oldest is 14. So, and very different variations of our life here. But we homeschool. I worked remote for 12 years, and we travel the world with our kids, and I work remotely and provide an awesome opportunity for my kids to explore and get hands-on capabilities with what a lot of kids are learning in classroom. They get to do out and about and actually be tangible with it. So, really excited to discuss kind of my expertise and where I've come from and kind of where I want to go.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the introduction. And first of all, happy belated birthday. I think it was your
Thanks,
birthday
sir.
about 4 days ago.
Yeah,
Plus
it was a big
the big,
4-0, so it was a tough one.
well, I got I got a decade on you. So,
All right.
40's easy. 50's not hard, but 40's easier than 50. The body aches a little bit. I saw your post. The body aches a little bit more as you get to 50, especially if you're like me. I just started playing pickleball a couple years ago, and I think I'm still 30, and I'm not. And
Yeah.
you filled after a couple days.
Yes.
So things to look forward to. In a lot of your posts, the one thing I do notice, you talk about leadership a lot.
Yeah.
How important that was, and every great leader has a mentor.
Yeah.
How do you try to do that for the teams you've worked with in the past and going forward? What's your biggest focus there?
Yeah, I take the good, the bad, and the ugly from the leaders that I've had historically. I've had really great leaders, and I've had not so great leaders, and then I've got spiritual leaders that I've also leaned on historically. And I take good things from the bad leaders, and I take good things from the good leaders. And I've learned, okay, well, how do I like to be managed? And that not doesn't necessarily mean that my teams like to be managed the same way I like to be managed. And so I get to know my team really in depth. I want to know what makes them tick. What do they feel comfortable with? Who have they been led by, and what's worked for them historically? And then I kind of mold the two together of taking how they like to be led and then bring in my style. And sometimes the way that they like to be led is not the best. Sometimes it's, hey, I want to be, really hands off. I don't want you to be in my day to day, but sometimes it's necessary. So it's a give and take of understanding where they've come from, where they're trying to go, what their goals are, and then what's the goals of the organization, what are we trying to accomplish. If they are sufficient enough to be self-sufficient, I give them enough leash to kind of make their own way. I don't like to micromanage, but as soon as you screw up and as soon as you lose that trust, then that leash tightens up a little bit. And so I come in and I want to give my team the ability. Look, we're all adults. I want them to succeed and help me coach them and guide them through their processes. And over the years, I've had leaders that didn't want to promote me because I was doing such a great job, but I've always wanted to help my people reach their goals. So whatever that looked like, whether it meant a promotion, more money, to learn something new that they haven't done before, I'm going to do whatever I can to help them accomplish those goals. And like I said, I've got some spiritual leaders, so I've taken some biblical principles and just what I do personally and brought them into how I lead as well.
Yeah, and I agree. The one thing you brought up that I think we've all experienced, is, especially if you've been a leader of a team, is you've been on teams where you've done really well, and that person does not want you to get promoted because they don't want to have to replace you.
Yeah.
But I think truly a great leader understands, hey, Bryce's goal is to do X, Y, Z. My job is to get them there.
Yeah.
I will, find talent elsewhere to
Yeah.
hopefully replace them and build them. So I always judged when I was, how to direct team, how many people could I get
Yeah.
promoted?
Yeah.
I want to be successful one way or the other. They
Yep.
get promoted, they're happy.
Yep.
Then down the line, I may need something from them. It's all, relationship building.
Yep.
And I think that's really, truly what separates a good leader or a great leader from a good leader. Because good leaders like, hey, I'm doing really well. Don't want to give this person up.
Yeah.
Great leaders like, no, let's get them where they want to be.
Yeah. I had a leader come to me and say, "Hey man, why are you constantly having to find new people?" And I was like, "Okay, well look at my numbers. Is it attrition or is it promotion?" And so we started digging into it. And he's like, "Well, it's promotion." I said, "Then that should be a plus, right? I should have the budget that I need to go find new people if my people are being promoted. Now, if they were quitting and if they were leaving because they weren't happy, then we can have a different conversation. But looking at the difference between attrition and promotion is a true definition of a great leader and growing his team."
Yeah, because you absolutely during this search, because you probably have. I mean, from what I could tell, you hadn't had to do it in a while. What's the biggest difference from the last time you were in a true job search to today's world, and how did you have to adjust to it?
Yeah, technology has come a long way, AI, and the big thing I'm seeing in the marketplace right now is these job seeker influencers. There's a ton of people out there that want to tell you about how to get a job. They're going to sell you a $1,500 course about these tools that you need and these emails that you can send and these resumes that are guaranteed to get you in front of the right people. And the more and more I've kind of gone through and I've done the research, I've looked at what influencers are saying, I'm doing some of my own research. I'm A/B testing resumes, I'm A/B testing emails. It's about networking. It's about who you know, and more importantly, who knows you. Who's willing to give you a recommendation? Who's willing to put their name behind you and either give you an internal referral or connect you to the right person, whether it be the recruiter or the hiring manager. I've read some articles lately that roles are being posted, and within 24 hours, you're having anywhere from 500 to 2,000 applicants apply to that role. Now, the applicant tracking systems might say 90% of them are qualified for this role, but when a recruiter actually gets in there and they start digging through it, they find maybe 10% is qualified to actually accomplish the role successfully. So they're having to sift through so much more data to find the right person. If you can come in and somebody can hand deliver your resume and say, "Hey, I personally recommend this person," it gets past all of the noise that they're seeing on these applications and puts you in the right position. And it's networking with people not only in your area but in your industry, and then also not just networking but engaging. I do post a lot, but then I'm really into partnerships, and so I found a lot of guys that are in partnerships and I'm reading their content and I'm commenting on their stuff to show support of them and to also validate what they're saying, as well as add my added value to what they're commenting on. All of that comes up when recruiters looking at your LinkedIn profile and they see that it's not just a resume at that point. You're actually showing value, you're showing your knowledge, and you're showing what you've done.
Have you seen small steps of success with that? Because I've noticed you put out there like, hey, you kind of list things and then you're like, hey, let's talk about it. Have you seen people reach out to you and say, hey, Bryce, let's have this conversation? Or has it been were you expecting to see more of that out there?
Yeah, I haven't found the right format to really get engagement. I get a ton of impressions.
Yeah.
Most of my posts, I get anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000 impressions. So people are looking at it, they're reading it. I've talked to a few guys that are influencers, quote unquote, or who get hundreds of comments, and I don't know what the secret sauce is. I'm not an influencer. I'm not a social media guy. I don't have anything outside of LinkedIn. No Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter. That's not my desire. But I'm like, okay, how do I showcase myself outside of just a piece of paper? And so I think engaging on other people's posts have actually driven a little bit more conversation. And I do get a few people that will shoot me a message and say, hey, this is great. I liked what you said here. Would love to talk about it. And there's been some conversations there. But I don't get a ton of added value comments to my posts currently. And I haven't really been going after it that long to really drive a consistent engagement and to really drive people coming to that. So will it continue? Yeah, I don't know if it'll increase and if I'll see some conversations that'll spark out of that. Unfortunately, I've gotten a couple of these kind of HR recruiter guys to repost some of my open to work postings or get on some of these lists of people that are pretty known and have 20,000 followers, and they add me to their hey, this is the open to work list. And
Yeah.
then I just get bombarded with spam and fake accounts trying to get information. And so that's the unfortunately the downside of today's market is there's so many bots out there. There's so much AI generated engagement through bots that you got to know how to sift through those and identify the real actual contributors to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got one today, and I forget who it was from or what their name was. It said like, "Do we know each other? You know, you keep coming up," and there's no even picture of it. It's like, okay, I did not, block and all that, but I've like in the last 3 days, I've gotten a ton of those, and one was like from farming and stuff, but there wasn't anything. Then they're like, "Hey, do you like this post?" And there's no post there. It's like, okay, now I just have to go in there and block stuff. I mean, it's
Yep.
not that it takes a lot of time, but I've better use of my time than that. But
Yep.
you are right. The more you put yourself out there, the more maybe unnecessary information you're getting because of the bots.
Yep.
So then you have to, sift through it going, is this legitimate? Hey, I might be a good fit, because of our title at Verizon, I'm listed as a solutions architect, which is more of a traditional engineering job, which is
Sure.
not what it was at Verizon. I mean, I always said I knew enough to get myself in trouble, but
Yeah.
definitely not an engineering guy.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of those, which is great, but they're not the right fit. So people aren't really looking at, say, a profile going, hey, does this make sense for us or for them or
Yeah.
for the end user? So that does make it difficult. I agree with you. The networking is the key. Like if you don't know anybody directly from a company, you have to spend the time trying to do research. Okay, who's a recruiter? Who could I speak out to? When you reach out to them directly, is it just a connect message like most people? Is that pretty much how you do it?
So I'm a sales guy. So I've tackled this as like, hey, I'm trying to get the partnership. I'm trying to get the sale. So what would I do, right? You if I see a comment or if I see somebody post a role that I'm like, hey, this is a good fit for me, I go on there and I comment. If I've applied, hey, I applied for this role, and here's just a small snippet of why I would be a value add. And then I go on their LinkedIn and I do connect with them and I write my 300 character message of why I'm a value add to them so that as soon as they connect with me and accept that connection request, they have a snippet there. And then a few days later, I use things like Apollo.io and it's free. And I can go in and I can actually find recruiters or maybe the hiring manager and get their emails. And I will send out an email. I'll get their email and I'll send an email. Here's my resume, my cover letter. This is why I'm a good fit for this role. Here's how I can add value to this position. And I think a lot of people miss the how can I add value, and that's key in today's market because so many people are the right fit for the role. But what can you bring to the table that's different than everybody else? And where are you going to add value to the organization? That's what they want to see. So, and then I'll even go as far as doing cold calls to a recruiter and try and get them on the phone. Apollo.io has that capability by providing the phone number, and it's a free tool, but it's got a lot of functions in it. And so, like I said, I come from sales, so I'm gonna try to win this sale and basically selling myself to get these recruiters to have a conversation with me. And 9 times out of 10, I found if I can get to that first conversation, then I have a good process through and I can get through and get to the hiring manager and at least get considered. So I've seen that most successfully in doing that when I'm going cold into a company that I don't have any connections with. The flip side is going and looking at all of my connections. I've built a decent network on LinkedIn. I've got 7,500 connections. So I know somebody at a lot of different companies, and people are sometimes more willing to take a chance on you. Hey, can I just get the referral link? I don't need you to make a recommendation. Just give me that referral link so that maybe I get a leg up on somebody else in that interview process or that queue process. So yeah.
No, that's some great advice. I've not used the IO, so I'm gonna check that out, and definitely I would recommend anybody listening to this, that might be a tool that you wanna look at to see if it can increase. Because, like you said, a handful of things I've been involved with have gone past that initial email. It's been the referrals or the networking. And I think that puts us all back, considering I'm older, like how it used to be. Like, get me in front of somebody, then it's on me
Yeah,
to sell them on
exactly.
why I'd be a good fit. And somebody, sometimes you do get frustrated and you're like, well, I'm not even getting past the first door. Well, A, you might not be the good fit, or I mean, we all know how business is. They may already have somebody in mind,
Yep.
but they still have to post it. I mean, but that's hard because you're not able to talk to somebody to know that,
Yep.
I mean, that is a difficult part with the technology side of it.
Yeah.
You also talked about in one of your posts about a sales playbook you put together when you were a director because you saw the team was performing, but maybe not doing it the right way. Was it something you created specifically for that team, or is this something you have used like in other roles in the past?
Yeah. So I say when it comes to sales, the process is all pretty relevant. It's all pretty much the same across the board. The product at the end of the day is what really differentiates your engagement and how you go through that sales process. So they actually brought me in to build their sales division from scratch before it came on full time, and they didn't really have the guardrails of, okay, when a client comes in and they're looking for our services, how do you start from A and go to Z? So they didn't have any of that. And so I've over the last 20 years have created in my idea of just a basic process of what that looks like and how to flow through that. So I took some of my experience and stuff that I've implemented and used at other organizations and picked up along the way from other leaders and from books and webinars and conferences, and just put together some guardrails for this really junior team. And they were very ambitious. Our team was actually outsourced. They were in the Philippines, but man, I'll tell you what, these guys work harder than some Ivy League graduates that I've had historically. They just had the drive, they had the passion, and then putting some guardrails around them, giving them some direction, giving them a lane to travel in really helped guide them in the right direction. So once the playbook was built and they were trained on that process, then it was, man, the feet to the ground, and they just took off and they ran because they knew how to go in the direction. Everything before was just kind of like, oh, this seems like the right fit or this seems like the right way, but there was a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misalignment. As soon as you start making that communication seamless and having those processes be aligned, then you can replicate, duplicate, and then take it to the next level and expand and grow and continue to grow. So yeah, I think the playbook really set us in the right direction and gave them the right direction that they needed to move forward and be successful.
Is that type of role something you prefer, taking something from scratch and build it yourself, or do you like going into, kind of a set role and, working within that frame?
So I think both. In this time, I've had several people be like, "Oh man, you've built several sales divisions, and you could go do this yourself." And I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not creative in that sense of like, "Hey, I want to go build my own business." I have no problem coming alongside somebody who's built something and help them grow that. And I've done it both ways. I've come in from scratch and built something from nothing, and been very successful. And I've come in and helped improve. I was with a SaaS company. They'd been around for 4 or 5 years, but they were really stagnant. They hadn't grown over about a $2.5 million revenue. I came in and just tweaked a few things that they were doing already, put some guardrails around and put some guidance around, really grew up their existing sales team, and we were able to double revenue within 2 years. So I've done it both ways, and I'm happy to continue on and doing it. It seems like the startup right now is I'm in a weird area. I've had director of sales or head of sales for some small companies. And then I've had some senior manager roles for some larger companies. And so I'm in this really weird spot that could I do the director of sales position at a company like Verizon? Sure. But I don't have that, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 experience that would give me that kind of foothold in those types of companies. But all the skills are there. The numbers are just different. Instead of taking 2 to 4 million, it's taking 50 to 100 million. Now, obviously, that climb is a lot different for some companies, and there's a lot more guidance and leadership guidance there. But it's I think at the end of the day, it's the same process. The numbers just look a little bit different. So I'm open to both, building from scratch or growing something that's already been there and refining it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I agree. Like because I've worked for the two major telecom companies, so for me it's a little different trying to go to say a smaller company
Sure.
when I'm used to say what a Fortune 100 company will do, and it works both ways. As a smaller company goes, well, if he's worked for XYZ company, he's not going to. But no, I've never had that experience,
Yeah.
so it would be a new challenge, and that's how I think you have to look at those things. Title's title, great. A job is a job,
Yep.
and how to manage people or how to sell is, it doesn't really matter where you're at. Is give somebody time to learn whatever that solution is, they'll be able to sell it.
Yeah.
It's just adapting,
Yep.
and that's the key, especially in the technology industry. Over your 20 years and, my 30 years, it's grown from point A, now we're, to point Z, and if you
Yep.
don't adapt, you fall behind, and,
Yep.
I think that's the one great thing about being in this industry is you have to adapt.
Yep. Change is inevitable. I started selling phones when I was in high school at Best Buy.
Yeah.
My first phone that I can remember that was like iconic was the Motorola V60. And I mean, it's dating me and taking me back how I've been. And then I launched the V3 Razor at Singular Wireless. I launched the iPhone at AT&T. And then I went to work at Samsung and went from the Galaxy S3 all the way up to their Galaxy Z Flip Fold 4 and the Z Flip 4. So the industry has changed. And my time at Samsung, the one thing that was constant was change. And you had to be adaptable in there. And that's what's really kind of given me my experience, is that I had to change constantly because things were changing in the industry and the marketplace, and you had to be able to adapt and overcome and be successful in those changes.
During this time frame, are you doing anything from a learning perspective to keep up with those changes that have been helpful?
Yeah, I am definitely I'm on YouTube a lot looking at tutorials. I've dabbled in a few certifications, and I've been constantly staying in AI and up on AI because that's the talk of the town today, right? Is how is AI going to affect the marketplace? Are jobs going to get replaced? And so I've stayed up on all of the major AIs and how they're implemented, and then looking at companies that are using AI as their base platform. There's so many new AI startups, and it's like, okay, I'm not a coder, but I understand how to use it in the marketplace, and can I add value to some of those companies? So definitely staying on that. I come from telecom, but I've got such a diverse background. People are like, do you ever regret not staying in telecom for 20 years, or staying in one industry? And the answer at the end of the day is yes and no. Yes, because I don't have 10 years of cybersecurity that some of these companies are looking for. But to a lot of organizations, mainly startups or companies that are thinking outside the box, diversity and experience is an added value. When I went to my EV startup, I was one of the only people that didn't have automotive experience. We had guys from Mercedes and Audi and Porsche, but they wanted somebody in the specific role that I was doing that didn't have the automotive experience to bring an outside perspective, to think outside the box, and to not think like an automotive person, but to think more technical and partner driven. So it's finding the right kind of function and taking my experience, all of what I can do, and bringing it in and finding the right organization that's going to see those historical experiences as an added value.
Yeah, I think diversity can definitely help in job functions. I was probably guilty because I'm one of those that did stay, with the same company for 18 plus years in a very similar role. I went from retail to SMB to enterprise. So I've done those different roles, and they are completely different, but they're in the same genre of data sales. So there are definitely pluses to that. Like you said, done cybersecurity for the last, 8 plus years, SaaS, so on and so forth. But for someone like yourself, hey, I have an EV background. That's big now. Back then, people were like, what? And like you said, they wanted a different set of eyes on it
Yep.
because you have, the automotive people just saying, no, it's this way. And you're like, well,
Yeah.
no, let's look at it this way.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would be beneficial to a lot of companies to have somebody that has a diverse background in job functions. Another post that you had, which I think is big for people that are in sales, was a comment that says how I lost a big deal. And, first thing I saw, because we talk about it all the time, I think you had what you thought was the decision maker, on board, boom, wanted everything. And then down the line, you said, well, they weren't the decision maker. And that was, that's the number one thing we would try to remember as reps and teach our reps. Hey, you got to make sure you're talking to the right person at, all the time. And we've seen so many deals fall out because, when we got to, okay, it's supposed to close by the 20th. Well, they need to talk to this person.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that and how did it make you better going forward?
Yeah. It's people always ask you in interviews, like, tell me about a time that, you closed a big deal. And I wanted to be vulnerable. I wanted to show like, hey, I've learned not only from my successes but from my failures. Leader that I worked with for years in retail, his name's Michael Forrest at Samsung. He had a quote that says, "Try, win, lose, learn." So when you try, you win. If you lose, you always got to learn from it. And so I wanted to talk about a deal that I lost and be vulnerable and talk about the ebbs and flows that went through that. And it's probably one of my um, more scared quotes and posts, because then that's on there and people are gonna be like, oh, you lost a big deal. But it's like, okay, a good learner and a good leader is going to learn from their mistakes, and they're going to learn from the areas that they lost in. And so it is taking a step back and looking at it and finding, okay, yeah, am I talking to the right person? I took everything from that, and then I had to tweak and make sure that all of the things that I took to in my notes were then going to be answered. Okay, yeah, you say you have the power to be the decision maker, but do you really? Can you sign the contract? If they say no, okay, then who is going to sign the contract? And how do I get to them? Or do I need to give you the assets that you need to go sell them to then get them in place? And then understanding, yeah, is the budget there? Are we in your buying cycle? Where do I need to be to get this to a yes? You don't count your chickens before they've hatched. And it's we get so ingrained in sales that as soon as you hear that yes, you're like, yes, like, this is done. I've got this in the bag. And there's so many steps to the finish line where it can fall apart. And so it's understanding, okay, not only do I have this one in the pipeline, but I've got two or three others in the pipeline just like it. And you can't always count on a deal being closed. I've even had some deals fall apart even after a signature has been signed because of a lack of budget, or somebody didn't have the authority to actually sign an agreement. And so it's learning from those, it's adjusting your approach, but at the same time, you got to have grace, you got to have understanding. You can't get frustrated. I've told my sales team, for years, you can't take it personal. 9 times out of 10, if somebody says no, or if somebody, doesn't have the budget, or if it doesn't work out, it's not because of you, it's because of the product at the end of the day. And so many people get defeated by the no, the no, the no, that it becomes an emotional thing. And so it's like, okay, well, how can we learn from that? What can you take away from those no's that can help you get to that yes? Because that will help you get to more yeses. And then obviously the more opportunities you have for no's, you increase your opportunities for yeses. So it's taking notes of those things, and then having somebody from the outside come in and take a look and say, hey, is there anything I can do differently on my next approach? Was there a red flag that you saw that I didn't see? And I've even asked some of my buyers, hey, what can I do differently? What if if I provided you with different information, or if we approach this differently, would that have changed the outcome? And just constantly asking for feedback from other people in your industry, your bosses, your leaders, and then even your clients at the end of the day.
First of all, I think it was great that you share that information because, when you talk to anybody, say in sports or anything, they don't really remember the big wins. It's always the big losses. I can tell you what went wrong with it.
Yep.
When you talk sports, it's like, hey, this pitch here, they remember those things.
Mhm.
You'll be celebrated for the big wins.
Yep.
You don't really need to remember those as much,
Yeah.
but you like I said, you need to learn from the losses, whatever that may be. And like you said, it is frustrating. Like you think something's closed. I was always with my reps, is it posted? Is it in the system yet? If it's not in the system, it's not closed.
Yeah.
And like you said, opportunity is key because you have to have, our big thing was you had to have, I think it was 300, 200, 100%, 30, 60, 90.
Yeah.
You had to have enough to hit your target plus exceed it. Because if something dropped out,
Yeah.
if you're relying on that one big deal, and if it dropped, we were always asked, well, how are you going to get to that number then?
Yeah. Yep.
And when you're new in sales, you don't realize that. And then as you get some more of a veteran, you realize, okay, this is why it's important to do these things. And I said, that's where leadership comes in, saying,
Yeah.
okay, Christian, here's why you have to do that. I know
Yep.
you got this, it's closed, but let's make sure just in case we're ready to go.
Yeah. Well, and it's even a diversity in the types of deals that you're going after. Are you going after whales, or do you have some buffalo and some small fish in there as well? Some sales guys that are younger come in and they see the potential of a whale. And they're like, oh my gosh, I could hit my whole goal with one deal. And they spend all of their time on that, when you've got other guys that have this massive field. They've got a ton of opportunities with some small fish. They have a few opportunities with some buffaloes, and then a couple of these whales that they're targeting that if they get it, great, it's amazing, but they're going to hit their goals with their small fish and their buffaloes. Ensuring that you have diversity across the different levels that you're working is essential.
Yeah, and with the whales, you don't realize too, is once you close them, they take most of your time for the next, depending on the industry,
Yep.
2 to 3 months.
Yep.
So you don't, like you said, have those fish and the buffaloes in there,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be successful in the upcoming months. So, you have to think long term and not short-sighted
Yep.
sometimes. So I think that's really great advice. If someone in your position, what would you tell them where said it can be tough. When I was talking to Dwight Jordan, you may see the name in LinkedIn, he pops up a lot. We were talking and he brought up the Seinfeld reference, how when you're running on empty, when you're in the car and you feel like you're running on empty some days. And we spent some time on that because I could relate to that. When you get to that kind of point, there's days, there's good days and bad days during this job search. What advice would you give people when they start getting really frustrated, say with the process? What would you tell them to do? Take a break? What would your advice be?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we all need a break sometime. And a lot of people say today looking for a job is a full time job. And it's absolutely true. If you want to be, get in front of as many people as possible, if you're applying for as many positions as you possibly can, then sure, then it is a full time job and it will drain you out. You got to take a step back sometimes, reprioritize, look at things. Okay, hey, I've been using the same resume for the last 8 weeks and I haven't had one interview. Okay, what can I change? What needs to be changed on there? Do I need to have it looked at differently? And I would encourage people to get online and find some local groups that are supporting people looking for work. Here in probably 20 or 30 meetings every single week where people who are looking for work can come together, learn, they can talk to some recruiters, they can have some professionals look at their resume, give them some pointers, and it's all free of charge. But the cool thing about it is you're surrounded by other people that are in your exact same boat. I've been reaching out to people that have the green tag around their profile picture and just saying, hey, I'd love to chat. I love to talk. I love to hear your story. And that's been huge for me. And I think it's been helpful for the people that I've conversed with because you're engaged, you're talking, right? When you're working, you're surrounded by people that are in your same industry. You guys have a common goal. So you have this camaraderie with your coworkers, your leaders, your employees. You're trying to achieve the same goal. When you don't have that and you're looking for a job, you don't have that surrounding network and that support to accomplish something. And so finding other people that are in the same boat is something that can help and benefit that. It's just having a conversation like you and I are about, hey, what are you doing that's successful? What have you seen? What can I do to help you? I had just the other day a girl. I liked her post and she sent me a message and was just like, hey, thanks for liking my post. And so you know what that did? It made me go look at her page and see what she's doing. And then she went on and reposted my open to work post. So it's engaging with other people that are looking for work and being supportive in that, and just getting you some camaraderie around you in this time that's really tough and it feels lonely and it feels, I talked about people saying no in sales because it's the product. Unfortunately, when I get a no today, I'm the product. So how do you not take that personal? And fortunately, I have a good support system with my wife and kids. And they're home all the time, so I can go out there and get some time with my little one and get a little bit of a perk up and a pep up. But it is, you get that email and it's just like, when it's a denial email because you're looking for that unfortunately or position
Yeah.
filled keywords. And so it's a numbers game, unfortunately, today, just like it is in sales. You got to get yourself in front of the right people, the right positions. And sometimes you just need to take a step back. Right now, I'm in a kind of a step back stage. I was applying for 10, 15 roles a week. Now I'm applying to maybe one or two a day. And I'm just kind of taking it a little bit slower, reset, get my mind right. And then, even considering taking some roles that might be a step back just to get into a role. People say it's easier to get hired when you have a role than to get hired without a role. I don't know if the numbers speak to that. I don't know the truth behind that. It's just everybody says it. So it just, at some point, you just need to make a decision. Okay, am I waiting for the right role or am I just going to wait for a role? And really be honest. I had a friend reached out, was like, hey man, I think you could do this role. Put me in touch with the CEO, talked with the CEO, and it was a role that I could do. I've done it historically, but it was just not what I've done. It's not what I've done in the last 10 years. And the CEO called me out. He goes, why would you want to go away from sales and like revenue generation to do certification? And I was like, I was just super straight up and honest. I said, I need a job. Do I have to do everything I want to do or that I'm really good at all the time? No. But at the end of the day, I need a job, and this could help me get there. And he respected that and was like, you know what? I think we might actually have a different spot for you within our organization. Let me see what I can do if we can make some moves to make something happen. And, a lot of people put up this fake wall and this facade of like everything's okay. Sometimes vulnerability is what people need, and they see that and put you in a spot that can maybe highlight you above somebody else. So honesty is, I think, the best policy that people say that, and it's be true to who you are. And I think that opens up a little bit more doors than some other aspects.
Absolutely. And what I'm finding out from this is when I start talking to people is you're hearing the humanity of people that are going through the same process.
Yep.
And like you said, you liked a young lady's post. She responded because it was a big deal. As small
Yeah.
as that may sound to somebody, like that's a big deal. Someone's actually reading something I'm putting out. And, that may inspire her to like somebody else's and so on and so forth.
Yep.
So I think when people have the opportunity, we all want to help other people when we can,
Yep.
whether it be help them find a position, just make them feel better for the day. And to a degree, this is kind of why I started doing this. Cause like I said, I, this does kind of become a full-time job if you let it, trying to find a job, which that's where it gets frustrating and
Yeah.
you get, down on yourself. Whereas, hey, if I can take, cause this, I'm talking to you for how long this will last. I'm gonna spend some time editing it, so it gets me out of doing the other things for a little bit. So when I go back to it, it's like, okay, I feel a little bit better. Let's go look. Let's try to find, a new
Yeah.
gig. And like I said, is it the perfect gig or is it a gig? And sometimes those are, you have to make those decisions
Yeah.
based on the personal things you're going through in your life.
Yep.
We'd all like to get the perfect job, but that doesn't always happen, at least at the right time. We may get the perfect job, maybe not this year, but we may get in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of also how we have to look at that. Before I wrap this up, just to, to try to keep it personal, you mentioned you traveled the world with your family. What's your favorite spot you've traveled to?
Oh man, so I'm more particular to the Southeast Asia. I've done Vietnam, Thailand, South Korea, Cambodia, Vietnam. We took my 4 kids, my wife, and my in-laws. We did 16 days in the UK, and we did 1,400 miles in a Mercedes Sprinter van. And that was my youngest was 1, so he'll never remember it, unfortunately. But for my kids to experience that was like the most amazing thing ever. And we want to go back, but Scotland was probably our favorite. We really love Scotland. I got to play on the oldest golf course in the world. It's called Musselburgh in Edinburgh, Scotland. And I was there with my father-in-law and my son, my oldest. It's like a 350-year-old golf course. And it was just an amazing experience to be able to do that.
Wow, sounds like a trip of a lifetime. And you must obviously you love your family, but you have to if you're in that Sprinter van for that long with
Yeah.
that many people.
Yeah.
You get to know each other real well,
Very
probably
well.
better than you did at some point. And then last but not least, barbecue fan, favorite thing to barbecue?
I love barbecue. I'm not a big barbecuer myself. I'm not
Oh,
much of a cook, but I will get down on some barbecue. Brisket is probably my go-to. I like it in any form, whether it just be sliced, chopped, or in a taco. Brisket's probably my go-to.
yeah, yeah, brisket's good. If you ever go to Austin, Terry Black's brisket
All
was
right.
one of the best I've ever had.
Yeah.
Not an expert, but it was yummy, needless to say. Well, hey, Bryce, I really do appreciate it. I mean, I think this was educational for me. I'm going to check out Apollo. I appreciate you sharing your story. I know that's, big, but my hope on these types of conversations is people get stuff out of it. They see that they're not alone, maybe to learn something that will help them. I said, you've been great on your post, telling people, hey, if you want to talk, let's talk. So maybe that will remind people, hey, people are out here, whether it be you, myself, or anybody else.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there are a lot of people out there that are, I'll say, selling their services, like, hey, we're the experts. Hopefully they are, because if you're spending that kind of money, I better get a job. I think you posted on the gentleman, I'm trying to get him on this, is the guy that's offering $10,000.
Yeah.
Anyone that gets him hired.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if that works, because I'm sure if it does, more and more people do it. But I think it's an interesting concept. Like, hey, here's a bounty. If
Yeah.
you want it, 10 grand's good money.
I think that's great
Um,
money.
we're all looking to look at his resume, seeing if that might be a possibility or not.
Absolutely.
But no, hey, thank you for the time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, bud.